I was a surrogate husband to my cheating wife. Yuengling Black and Tan was warm. When I sat down at the table, it was icy cold. She would be home soon. She was always home when the kids got off the school bus. I pulled the curtains because the sunlight streaming through the living room window was oppressive. Now, tonight, the darkness seemed warning and calming. I wasn't expecting a confrontation. I was ill-prepared, both mentally and emotionally, to deal with it. What I feared most was my anger. As a child, I was prone to tantrums. As I became an adult, I had no confidence in myself. Either way, we had to act fast because the school bus was due in about an hour. They can't know. I would do everything in my power to keep them from finding out. 10 years of marriage wasted. 10 years of my life wasted. 10 years of planning and dreaming wasted. There was no future to look forward to. Nothing. A rational person would have started thinking about what to say or how to approach the upcoming discussion. Every time I tried to come up with a clever phrase or comment, I found myself in a void. It kept coming back to the same thing: self-pity. I felt sorry for myself and sorry for what my children might have to go through. It was unacceptable. There was no plan of action. Foolishly, I sat back and waited to see how the situation would unfold. I wasn't prepared. I was finishing the last of my warm beer when she opened the door. "John, why are you sitting in the dark?" She walked over to the window to open the curtains. "No, let them close for now." This wasn't exactly a normal situation. I was never home in the middle of the day. I was always at work. Maybe that was part of the problem. Putting her purse and jacket back in place, she looked thoughtful. "Are you sick?" Number just depressed and frustrated. "Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything I can do?" "There's nothing you can do, but I want to talk about it. I just don't know how or where to start." "Is everything okay at work?" "Stop it. Please stop. Just sit down and listen. I'll say what I have to say as best I can. You don't have to say anything. In fact, I'd rather you didn't say anything." Courtney sat back and looked at her hands. I heard her mutter quietly to herself, "Here's trouble. I know about you and Mitch Cooper." She slowly raised her eyes to me, and even in the dimly lit room I saw moisture in her eyes. Not tears, but almost. She started to say something, but I held up my hand. I didn't know what to do. I had no plan of action. In desperation, I threw the empty long tankard across the room and walked out the front door. She stood up but did nothing to stop me. Recovery. I had no idea where I was going or what I was going to do. Such questions were foreign to me. First of all, there were the kids. Courtney and I both came from single-parent families. I vowed that no matter what, my children would never have to go through this. That meant divorce was out of the question. It also meant abandonment was not an option. I was screwed. My first stop was Gilbert Enterprises. There was a lot of vacation time there, and I had no problem getting a week off. I had a small staff working for me, but they were all competent and could fill in for me in my absence. I started at Gilbert 12 years ago as an apprentice draftsman and was now in charge of the entire graphics office, including a small support staff. I worked hard and was rewarded for my efforts. A summer trip to Dollywood seemed to have been eliminated from the schedule. Shortly after starting at Gilbert, I met Courtney. It was always unclear to me how we met. It was some sort of bar picnic at one of the engineers' houses. I was there, and suddenly she was there with me. It wasn't like I was stalking her or anything. She started chatting, which was unusual because girls usually avoided me. I wasn't what you'd call a great guy. I was too skinny, too tall, and too dorky. Courtney went to school a year ahead of me and hung out with the cool kids. In fact, I remembered her spending a lot of time with one of the guys who looked like Fonzie. Yeah, you guessed it. His name was Mitch. One thing led to another, and less than a year later we were married and pregnant. Everything seemed normal and right at the time. I was happy and she seemed happy. Courtney was pretty much normal in every way. She didn't stand out in a crowd or draw attention to herself. From my perspective, she was perfect. A year after our son Bobby was born, we had our daughter Danny. Everything was just fine for 10 years. It's common for people to spend large sums of money at restaurants when celebrating something. I ended up spending an exorbitant amount at my favorite sushi bar to drown my sorrow. There was nothing extra on the menu, and I treated myself to all the goodies I had always turned down because of the price. 2 hours later, I found myself at the Best Western Hotel throwing up my expensive treats. It was better to get in than to get out. I just didn't know how to throw pity parties. I needed a plan. I needed help. I had a whole week to come up with something, gathering facts. There was no point in fiddling with the insurance, check, or credit card. There was nothing to change there. Our lifestyle was going to stay the same. I knew Courtney would have some sort of explanation to give, but I really didn't want that. If she admitted to everything and I was forced to accept what she told me, I would officially become a cuckold. I couldn't figure out how to avoid that. There was no way she could or would deny it. It was out of character for her. I had no idea of the depth of the affair. I didn't know how long it lasted or how serious it was. Was she planning to leave me? Too many unanswered questions. I finally found some old high school friends who were aware of Mitch and Courtney's relationship. What was interesting was that they had never broken up or split up. As far as anyone knew, they had always been a couple. Some of them knew that I had married Courtney, but not much more than that. Mitch Cooper was a good-looking guy and very charismatic, just the opposite of me. He also wasn't very ambitious, either academically or career-wise. He barely graduated from high school and had worked at the local Firestone tire store for the last 10 years. He wasn't a manager or anything, just a tire guy. There's nothing wrong with being a tire changer, but at some point most people move on to a store manager or supervisor position. Mitch was still working at the entry level and seemed happy with it. I was confused. What was it that appealed to me? I was working hard to provide for my family and being rewarded with infidelity. I guess other women would appreciate my efforts, but none of them showed any interest in me. I was with Courtney because she wanted me to be with her. But then why? I spent the day talking to old friends, acquaintances, and classmates. Putting it all together, I had a pretty clear picture. Courtney and Mitch had never had a fight. As far as anyone knew, they had always been a couple, and many assumed that was the case. I never asked her about her relationship with him. I didn't want to know. I assumed it was an old story and that she had moved on. I wasn't jealous, suspicious, or worried about my marriage. I guess that was my mistake. I knew now that I had to confront her. It would be difficult for me and, I'm sure, for her. I just hoped she wouldn't hurt me too much. Of course, I still didn't understand what I wanted to get and how I could fix the problem. Answers. The next night, I managed to get a small private table at Luciano's restaurant. We were able to talk without being overheard or interrupted. Courtney arrived on time, looking good but nervous. She sat and smiled but didn't say anything. We ordered, ate, and enjoyed the wine. It was awkward, to say the least. Neither of us mentioned the pressing problem. Finally, the coffee arrived, and I decided to open Pandora's box. Can I get some sort of explanation without the emotional rhetoric? Instead of trying to explain, could you give me an idea of exactly what you want to know? It would be easier and faster that way. Was this a way to avoid revealing what I didn't know, or was it an honest response to my request? How long? It was a short question, and I hoped for a short answer. 12 years. Needless to say, I was shocked, and I'm sure my facial expression showed it. She saw my reaction and looked away, avoiding my gaze. You dated him the entire time we were married? Yes. There was no sugarcoating in her answer. It was short and to the point. She sat in silence, waiting for my next question. It was hard for me to sit still. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, but I really needed a better answer. I gestured for the waiter to pour coffee. This wasn't going the way I expected. Why did you marry me? I tried to keep the question simple and straightforward, but I felt the answer to this one would be more complicated. The quick answer is because you could give me something he couldn't or wouldn't. That answer spawned a whole bunch of new questions. I hesitated to answer too quickly because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation. I was amazed that I was able to contain myself, and then I realized that I was actually intrigued by the flow of the conversation. But why did you choose me? I didn't choose. He chose. Courtney, I think we're at the point where you have to stop giving me short answers. I want and need an explanation. I promise I'll sit here and be quiet while you explain it to me in a way that makes sense. Okay. But before I begin, please believe me that in no way was there any attempt to hurt or harm you. We have never done or said anything to disrespect you in any way. Except for the fact that she had deliberately turned me into a cuckold, I had to agree with her. I nodded for her to continue. Mitch and I were very close for many years, and we swore our devotion to each other. We were truly in love, just like in the movies and in these novels. As corny as it sounds, we were true soulmates. We had one big problem we couldn't overcome. I wanted a home and a family, and Mitch absolutely refused to even think about it. After many months, we finally decided that we would try to find a surrogate husband. We had no idea what we were doing, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. Trying to find the right guy turned out to be not so easy. It had to be someone who we felt could provide a stable environment and still be a good companion. We finally settled on you. Believe it or not, John, you were the best of the best. That's why we chose you. I waved at the waiter to pour coffee. This whole thing was too ridiculous to believe. Courtney, I hate to interrupt you, but are you saying the plan was to live with me as husband and wife, but keep Mitch as your lover and soulmate? Yes. My children? Yes. You can check if you see fit. Returning home. The night ended quickly. I couldn't find the words. The conversation stalled, and we both just sat there looking at each other. Of course, I still had a lot of questions, but my emotions were running high, and I was afraid of losing control. I needed to process the information I had received and do it calmly, without interference. The next few days passed in depression. I had a hard time understanding how she could so easily accept me as a love partner when she was so madly in love with Mitch. They both knew their plan involved Courtney and me having sex. Did he have to convince her to sleep with me, or did she have to convince him to go along with it? Looking back, I couldn't pinpoint a single moment when there was an intense romantic relationship between them. Everything seemed platonic and very casual. Most of the information came to me after I accidentally discovered a text message on her phone. This prompted a deeper investigation that confirmed my suspicions. I could only trace a small amount of time, but I noticed that they met once or twice a month, if at all. It wasn't what I would call a hot and heavy affair. I didn't even realize how intense it was at the beginning of the marriage. The text messages were not erotic or sexual, but very businesslike, if I may say so. It was like scheduling a dentist appointment. I was sure she had brought him up to speed, and I was sure they had gotten together to discuss how they were going to handle it. Courtney told the kids that I was away on a business trip. In order to keep the family stable, I had to come home and act as normal as possible. By the end of the week, I was back in the house and back in my bedroom. Except for the lack of sex, our life was back to normal. I joined a gym. I wasn't overweight or flabby, but I wasn't what you would call handsome. I felt like I was now in competition with my own wife, although I wasn't sure I wanted to stay with her. Although I didn't have a specific plan, I was motivated to get in better shape and be healthier. I started getting up earlier. I would have a protein shake for breakfast and then head straight to the gym before anyone else was out of bed. At the gym, I would shower and go straight to work. One day, cardio, and the next day, strength training. I found that I became obsessed with exercise. I started working out longer and more on the weekends. I volunteered for trips and seminars, anything to get away for a while. I was amazed that I was able to maintain a normal relationship with Courtney under these circumstances. We never discussed the issue. The only time it was different was in the bedroom. We were in a state of uncertainty. No direction, no plans, no future. I felt like I was living with a housekeeper I happened to share a bed with. I needed help. Spending an hour on the treadmill or C2 machine 4 days a week gives you plenty of time to think. I loved being married. I never envisioned myself married to anyone but Courtney. And I still can't. While I could never forgive her betrayal, it made me a little uncomfortable. The more I thought about it, the more confused I got. She was married to me, but she was sleeping with someone else. Hence, I was a cuckold. Or was I? The man she was cheating on me with had been her partner many years before I met her. Was she cheating on me with him, or was he cheating on her with me? It was so easy to confuse myself. Does a piece of paper called a marriage certificate matter, or is it all about the perception of the relationship? Courtney and Mitch had different perceptions of family and marriage. Somehow, unknowingly, I was dragged into this mess and used to resolve the conflict. Mitch had to pay a price to keep Courtney happy, letting me sleep in the same bed with her. Knowing how close they were, it must have been a difficult decision for him to make. Nevertheless, I was being used, and I didn't like it. However, I felt like I was getting the best part of the deal. I put up with my self-imposed mental dilemma for about 2 weeks, and then I decided that since I wasn't going to divorce Courtney and I wasn't going to leave, I was going to keep having sex with her. I'm going to try my best not to get embittered or retaliate. Before starting this new phase of my marriage, I also decided that some ground rules needed to be established. That afternoon, I made a reservation at Luciano's for dinner. The evening started slowly, just like the previous time. Courtney seemed hesitant to start any kind of conversation. I wanted to speak up, but I couldn't bring myself to start. The silence was broken by the waiter. "Can I get you anything else?" There was nothing dramatic about it, but it did help us get talking. "Just another coffee, please." "I think we should call it a day. It looks like they're getting anxious to close." "Courtney, I'd like things to go back to normal if we could. Under the circumstances, there are a few things we have to agree on. There's nothing difficult about it, and if you don't like what I'm about to suggest, I'm willing to listen to a counteroffer." She nodded for me to continue and smiled slightly. "First off, if it's okay with you, I'd like to start having sex again. Sleeping together is great, but I really miss having sex. I might have some difficulties at first, but hopefully with time, I'll get over it and things will normalize. Are you okay with that?" Courtney nodded her head and non-verbally mouthed the word, "okay." "Second, I'd like us to continue living together as husband and wife until the kids are grown. When the children are no longer at home, we will quietly divorce and go our separate ways. We expect it will be about 10 years before Danny goes to college or gets married. Will you be able to hold out that long?" There was a slight pause, as if she was deep in thought. "John, do you mean that if things go satisfactorily, we will live together until there are no children left at home, and then we can separate?" Then, we will definitely separate. That won't be an option." "But what if—" She never finished the sentence. I stared at her, waiting for a more definite answer. Finally, she looked up and mumbled the word, "okay," again. But this time, she didn't smile. "Finally, I believe that you can continue your relationship with Mitch, but I insist that you do it in a way that I don't know about it. I'm not happy with the current situation, but I feel it would be difficult and stressful for both of us if I insisted that you stop seeing him. I can't and won't waste time and energy trying to break up your—" I never finished that sentence. I didn't wait for a response from my wife. I stood up, threw 3 20s on the table, and held the chair out for her so we could leave. The ride home was uneventful. There was no sex that night. My big mistake. The conditions I had set were never openly discussed. It was as if they were automatically accepted as soon as I voiced them. We started having sex again. It wasn't great at first, but gradually we got used to each other and things got better. Home life returned to normal. As the sex got better, it also got a little rougher. I didn't do it on purpose, but I guess I was feeling a little competitive, so I tried harder. I became more picky about the types of sex and the frequency of it. Courtney never said no or complained. After a while, the novelty wore off, and I found myself going backwards. I guess I was trying to prove a point. The most unusual thing I realized was that over time I stopped feeling like a cuckold. Technically, I guess I was, but in my head, I began to see it differently. Courtney was Mitch's woman. She'd always been his woman. I used her any way I wanted, any time I wanted, whenever I wanted, and there was nothing he could do about it. Sure, I fed her, provided a home and clothes, but I convinced myself that was payment for her services and care of the children. I didn't know about the time she spent with him by arrangement. What I didn't know didn't hurt me. One day, when my car needed an oil change, I decided to stop by the Firestone store where Mitch worked. While the car was being serviced, I stood in front of the glass display case overlooking the service department and watched my wife's lover. At first, he didn't notice anything, but after a while it became obvious. He stopped for a moment and realized who I was. I'm sure he had seen me before, but never under these circumstances. He worked on the tire bursting machine for almost an hour, and I watched him. I didn't flinch once, and he noticed that. When my machine was finally ready, I stepped away from the display case and walked out. The whole time, he looked uncomfortable. I felt a little redeemed, but not much. A week later, I brought Courtney's Civic in for an oil change and did the same thing. After about 30 minutes, he stopped work and stared at me. With a wide grin on my face, I gave him 2 thumbs up and laughed. He couldn't hear me, but he could see it. I stepped away from the window and soon left. The next day, everything went downhill. When I got home from work, I noticed the kids weren't home. Dinner wasn't waiting for them, but Courtney was. "You rotten asshole!" It was a good start, but there was more to come. I sat down as she walked around the kitchen table and glared at me. "In 10 years, Mitch and I have never once humiliated or disrespected you. 10 years we've given you all the attention we could to make sure everything ran smoothly. And now you've decided you want to be an asshole. You go to his workplace and make him look like an asshole. You insult him in front of his co-workers and laugh about it. You have everything, a nice house, a good job, great kids, and a wife. He has nothing, but you feel you have to bring him down even lower. It was a heinous act, and now I'm ashamed to be your wife." I didn't move. She was right. "We have an agreement, and I'm willing to honor it, but if you embarrass me like that again, I'm walking out the door and taking the children with me." I didn't say anything back. "Do you understand?" "Yes." "Good. I'm going to take a shower, call Domino's, and order a pizza. The kids are staying the night at your parents' house." While I was waiting for the pizza, I realized one important thing. I was an asshole. Moving on. The next day, Courtney was back to normal. My stupidity was never brought up again. I never went back to the Firestone store again. I started focusing on work and the kids. For the next few years, everything went smoothly. It was like those few weeks were erased from our memories. I didn't check on her in any way. Not that I didn't care, more like I didn't want to know about it. Gilbert Enterprises rewarded my efforts with a pay raise and a promotion. I was now also in charge of the EDP department. My knowledge in this area was weak, but I knew how to utilize my people effectively, and it paid off. Our friends and family never knew about the outgoing problem, and we successfully presented ourselves as a loving, happy family. As far as I know, the kids didn't even realize it. Surprisingly, I had no bitterness. I really enjoyed the relationship and the companionship with Courtney. Every once in a while, I would think about her and Mitch, but it passed quickly. I convinced myself that the cuckold wasn't me, but Mitch. I took his woman and used her. It was a little delusional, but I could live with it. Bobby graduated from high school and immediately joined the Air Force. Danny got a good scholarship to Penn State University, and we had enough savings to cover all her other expenses. The day after Danny left, Courtney and I sat down at the table. You knew this day would come. Yes. Mitch will be happy this is finally over. John, I haven't seen or spoken to Mitch in over 6 years. I have no idea where he is at all. It was good news, but I tried not to show it. Of course, I knew why she hadn't seen Mitch, but there was no way I would let her know that. I really didn't want her to leave. Even though she had been unfaithful, I still loved her. I wanted to let her know, but my stupid pride held me back. She spoke again before I could say anything. John, as I recall, you said we'd be together as long as the kids stayed home. Is that true? Yes. I'm pregnant. 2 stupid people. Things weren't going the way I expected. I got up and went outside. The fresh air helped calm me down. I sat on the porch, staring into the void. Courtney came out and sat down next to me. She put her hand on mine but didn't say anything. There were tears in both of our eyes. I knew now that she really wanted to stay together. It was a desperate move on her part, and I'm sure she had spent a lot of time preparing for it. You know I had a vasectomy 6 years ago? Yes, it was a mean and nasty thing to do. I also think you regretted doing it. Why? Because it effectively ended our marriage. I didn't want it to end. I didn't want it to either. But I don't understand why you thought getting pregnant would change anything. The fact that you found out about it would have led to the opposite result to what you wanted. I didn't have a choice. If you had given me a clue or some hope, I might have done things differently. I didn't want to lose you. Okay, I'll bite. Who's the father? Courtney reached into her apron pocket and pulled out an envelope. This cost me over $8,000. I have no idea who the father is, but you and I will raise this child as our own. These are your terms, and I will honor them. At the top of the form was written, Lehigh Burke's Infertility Clinic. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.